Welcome to episode 53 of Detour 365, and we are looking at Joshua chapter 5, 13 through chapter 6, probably verse 5. We're focusing on the encounter that Joshua has with the commander of the Lord's army, or most likely a present manifestation of God in the Old Testament, known as a theophany. And there is evidence for this, but it fits with our theme, of course, humanity of God. We're back in that series, and I'm going to give some quick context to what we're reading. It's in the book of Joshua, which comes after Exodus. So the Hebrews have left Egypt, gone through the wilderness with Moses, and now Moses has passed on leadership to Joshua. And those are some big shoes to fill, for sure. There's an enormous task ahead. They are now entering the outskirts of this promised land that they were many years in wandering to get to, and the land is populated, though. It has, they're called to conquer the land, but it's full of, as we see, large people in stature, height. The land is unknown to these people because, again, they came from Egypt, and their ancestors had been in Egypt for hundreds of years, so the land is unknown, even though it's the land that they were supposed to come to. So they're in unknown territory that they have to conquer, full of large people, and as we'll see with Jericho, an impressive fortification. Walls around cities were very important strategically for defense, and also they were a symbol of the strength of the city or the nation, and they were just very important in the ancient world. And so the symbolic, as we'll see, the symbolic significance of the walls of Jericho falling, there's a point there to be made. And Jericho was really the first stronghold they were encountering in entering the promised land. And it was the first major test of faith for this new leader, Joshua, and the people. You have the promises and the commands of God, and then you have what is right in front of them, which is you have this land that's full of fortifications and people, and it's kind of intimidating. And so we come to the point where Joshua and the people are outside Jericho. Joshua is looking towards Jericho, probably thinking about how to attack this city that is, well, it says the people were shut in, right? They were really depending on their walls for their strength and security, and for good reason, again, because cities with big walls were hard to take. So we're starting from Joshua 5:13, unless you think we should start a little earlier.
That's really where, we run into God.
Yeah. And
discussion may take us earlier.
All right, Bill is reading from the version of his choosing.
Complete Jewish Bible once again.
Is there an incomplete version?
Probably.
Well, there he goes.
One day when Joshua was there by Jericho, he raised his eyes and looked, and in front of him stood a man with his drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went over to him and asked him, "Are you on our side or on the side of our enemies?" "No," he replied, "but I am the commander of Adonai's army. I have come just now." Joshua fell down with his face to the ground and worshiped him, then asked, "What does my Lord have to say to his servant?" The commander of Adonai's army answered Joshua, "Take your sandals off your feet, because the place where you're standing is holy." And Joshua did so. Jericho had completely barricaded its gates against the people of Israel. No one left and no one entered. Adonai said to Joshua, "I have handed Jericho over to you, including its king and his warriors. You are to encircle the city with all your soldiers and march around it once. Do this for 6 days. 7 Kohanim are to carry 7 shofars in front of the ark. On the 7th day, you are to march around the city 7 times, and the Kohanim will blow the shofars. Then they are to blow a long blast on the shofar. On hearing the sound of the shofar, all the people are to shout as loudly as they can, and the wall of the city will fall down flat. Then the people are to go up into the city, each one straight from where he stands."
Very good. Is that so that is what they did in fact do. Those were the instructions that God gave them. And I will say the shofars were probably the big Middle Eastern shofars, not the little European shofar.
Big ram's horns.
Big ram's horns. So they would have made some noise.
Yes. And the Kohanim are priests.
Yeah. So why does this fit into our series? It's because God is appearing as, well, in human form, giving instruction and getting involved in. That's another thing about this passage. God gets involved in a battle. And, he describes himself as the commander of the Lord's army. So very military language here. And you could almost read through this and not notice that there are clues that this is God talking to Joshua. For one, this is holy ground, that line.
Yeah.
Joshua worships this individual, and we see throughout the Bible if somebody encounters an angel and did John and Revelation start to try to worship the angel that was talking to him, and the angel said, "No, I'm just an angel. Don't worship me." But in this case, that kind of points to it not just being an angel that's in command of other angels, and it also describes him as talking to the Lord in chapter 6. And we get the picture that this was like a continuation of the conversation and thought. So I'm really struck by that question that Joshua asks at the beginning.
What I have a question. Was when Abraham first left to go on his journey, right? Didn't something similar happen? Like, wasn't he confronted by some men or something, and they said like, "Kneel, you're on holy ground" or something like that?
Now, when Moses encountered the burning bush, he had to take his sandals off because he was on holy
Okay.
ground.
Okay, that might be what I was thinking of then.
But also, Abraham did encounter some men, or a man who we believe was God appearing as a man. So yeah.
Did they say something similar, or did he say something similar at the time?
I know with
Because like
Moses,
his wife
for
was in
sure,
the
the
tent or
Holy
something.
Spirit, but
Trying to remember that conversation.
you remember, Bill? Was Abraham ever told holy ground, or was there
No.
kind of no?
I
No,
don't
okay.
remember Abraham ever being told the holy ground thing.
I know God put him to into like a sleep,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I don't recall that, but
I don't remember him ever being.
why do you think there's this instance of holy? Do you think this is pointing to Moses, sort of in a way? God, because when God calls Moses, God does the burning bush and the holy ground. You're on holy ground thing. But now God is talking to Joshua, and Joshua's just sort of taking the reins.
Well, this is the first.
Encounter
Isn't
Joshua
this the
has
first time Joshua ever really directly encounters Adonai?
I believe so. Yeah. Because he would see Moses talking to God.
Yeah,
But this
is the first direct encounter that Joshua has with Adonai. And I think the first encounter that Adonai has with these leaders, he wants them to understand that they are separated from the rest of the people. And that's an indication they are directly connected to him. And I think that's one thing that take off your shoes is indicative of, is to enable that connection, that direct connection to God. Because that holiness is that, helps define that separation.
Yeah.
You're mine. You're mine.
Well, it's interesting that he has Joshua take off this, I guess, shoes are a barrier between you and the ground.
Yeah.
And we'll get more into the wall, because it is an important part of the story, because it is kind of, you have the people who are connected to God fighting the people who are hiding behind this barrier and kind of relying on this, man-made security sort of thing. I mean, walls were effective, but
Well, it's important in this story that God uses the people
yeah,
in obedience. You see it?
it is an
The
act of
problem with the first group of people out of Egypt was they ignored God's orders to go into the land I've given you and take it.
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, we're scared." And God said, "Well, you're not going to get it. You're going to die out here in the desert." And then they got this chance with Joshua, and they said, "Okay." And they followed Joshua across the Jordan River. And they're there for their big test. And it's this symbolic battle being led by God, because now who's going to believe walking around this city
yeah.
for 7 days and then wrapping it up with everybody yelling at this city is going to make this fortified city's walls fall down and the Israelites be able to walk in and slaughter everybody?
I did before we would get to that. I mean, we've kind of gotten to it, but I did want to look at this question of Joshua asks God, are you for us, or are you for our adversaries?
Yes.
And God answers, at least in my translation, the ESV, no. But I am the commander of the Lord's army. Okay, let's see. Are you for us or for our adversaries? And he said no. Like, was that a no to both of those? Because Joshua kind of asked him.
Yeah, in my translation, it said neither.
Neither. Okay, that's important. Because that's kind of a question I kind of had in this. And I mean, it's a question we often have, is God on a side? I mean, God is on God's side, but as far as intervening in human events.
Well, I mean, he's gone as far as saying, "You are my chosen people," to a group of people. So I'd say he's on a side.
Yeah.
I think he meant it the way it came out.
Neither. Yeah.
I am not on a side.
But he does guide events.
He placed them in this position, just like he placed the people initially there on the bank of the Jordan after he delivered them out of Egypt. Are you going to be my obedient people?
Well, let me about the. I'm just afraid I might forget to summarize later. But it does seem to me that this whole battle sequence and everything, with them, showing up, they had to do the thing and show up and then do something for 6 or 7 days, and then trust that God would do his part. I would say taking out of that, would be, the kind of you could look at it two different ways. Looking at it not religiously would be like, you got to show up and trust the process and do your part for any results to happen. But adding to that, like the let me be better lighting. There we go. The religious aspect of that would be, trust the Lord to break down the barriers in front of you as long as you uphold your part.
Well, this
Right.
this was kind of a micro. This was kind of a small case, Well, I mean, it was a major battle, but it was kind of the beginning of this great conquering of this land. That this wasn't the only fortification they were going to have to take, but it was, I guess, kind of this first test of faith, and they're asked to do this unusual thing that didn't really make any sense, but oh, I did want to keep jumping around, but I did want to ask, in this whole is God on a side thing, or does God intervene in, I guess, battles, and because I've watched recently there was something on, wasn't on the History Channel, it was American Battles or something.
Mhm.
I think it was a Kelsey Grammer thing. And was it when Washington was crossing
The Delaware.
the Delaware, right?
Mhm.
Not when he crossed to attack, but when he crossed to escape the British. He crossed some body of water, the Delaware River or the Hudson River, the Hudson, and the fog rolled in. Like this mysterious fog rolled in, and they were able to make it across,
Yeah.
evacuate a bunch of people.
Mhm.
I mean, there are a lot of instances like that, like in these major history shaping battles and things where it appears that some supernatural force, usually, the weather acts in some weird way that it never acts at that time of year. And, you could look at the evacuation out of Normandy or something like that, or not out of Normandy, out of,
Oh yeah.
what was that? Begins with a D.
Denmark?
Dunkirk.
Oh,
Yeah,
Dunkirk. Yeah.
You have a lot of these instances where you kind of wonder, was
Yeah, that was the hand of God.
God playing a role in that? But then God would be taking a side in that.
Yeah.
By helping one side over the other.
Absolutely.
Even though, I mean, of course, I believe that the Allies were the greater force for good, but, they weren't perfect, and, they weren't like some angelic force or something. I mean, they were still humans, and, this was a human conflict that God. I mean, this of course is a different circumstance because they are going to the promised land, and this is clearly part of God's plan that they were supposed to have it. This land, and this was going to be their base of operations to settle in and all that. And then the people of the land that they were conquering had these practices like child sacrifice, like prostitution and their worship, and they, of course, they didn't worship God, they worshiped their own gods and idols and pantheon. And God said, if these people remain in the land with you, they are going to be a snare. They're going to entrap you and tempt you, and you're going to just become like them. You're not going to, influence them. They're going to influence you. That could be another, I guess, if you're looking at like kind of practical lessons in this for your life, removing potential negative influences. I mean, the Israelites did not really do that. And as we see later on, they did become kind of like the other people of the land from time to time. And, they didn't completely conquer the way they were supposed to. And they didn't, I mean, there's kind of a lot in there. And they were led astray by even some of the neighboring peoples that were there. And so, there's that in the story too. That's kind of another reason for the conquest, that God had a special mission for these people. Not that they were better than other people per se, but they were chosen for this special mission, and they were supposed to inhabit this location, and the people that were already there weren't going to just leave. They had built forts and farmed the land, and they weren't going to just let these people come in and like say, well, God told us this is our land now, so they weren't going to just pack up and leave. So they had to be
I think it's worth mentioning that Jericho is what is it? The oldest continuously inhabited city that we know of. It's been inhabited for 11,000 years or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was rebuilt, I do believe.
Yeah, it's been rebuilt a few times, but it's been conquered a few times, I guess, but
and rebuilt.
Yeah, but it's been continuously inhabited, like as a city.
Was that like the Monty Python, the castle in the swamp? They rebuilt it.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
I don't think I've actually ever watched that.
Oh,
good.
I wish I had. What did he say? I built the castle again, and then sank into the swamp, and then I built it again. And
I haven't seen that in 20 years, probably. It's a funny movie.
Well, Joshua.
Yeah, I feel like everybody's seen it but me.
Yeah, what Joshua even said after.
I think I have it downstairs. I believe we have the original media.
Well, I think Joshua even said whoever rebuilds it will be cursed, right? Or something. There's.
I thought you meant our friend Joshua for a moment.
Oh,
yeah, that's the other thing.
People.
The name. We should kind of mention that a little bit, because I do have a question, and Bill might be able to answer this. And
maybe
it could just come down to language, and because Joshua, or in Hebrew is in English, Joshua is, there's Joshua and there's Jesus, but in Hebrew it's kind of the same name, right? It's
well,
Yeshua
Joshua and Yeshua are very close. That's for sure.
It's a lot closer.
What's on?
I said Joshua and Yeshua seem very close.
They are very close.
Yeah.
But Jesus' name is Yahshua.
Yeah.
Which is the name of God, which is Yah.
Yeah. Yeah.
God saves.
So it's literally the name of God, Yah.
Yeah.
Saves. And Yeho, which in Hebrew is kind of translated Y''Ho, Shua,
Yahshua and Yehoshua.
Joshua.
Joshua.
So it's just a little different.
But in English, the names are very
They're
different. More different than they are.
They're just virtually identical.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Let me see if I can see what the difference is.
I mean, there is some difference, but it's not. It's just something I was curious about, but I mean, it doesn't. Something to look into, at least.
As far as Hebrew is concerned, they're the same name.
Yeah, I thought either the same or very close, right?
Um,
You just maybe emphasize certain syllables more than others, or certain sounds, but they're the same.
they're the same.
Huh. But we don't call, like, we know a Joshua, but we don't call him Jesus.
That's right.
We have two different names.
Jesus really comes from, the when they translated the Hebrew into Greek, and then they took and translated the Greek into Latin, and then they translated the Latin into English, and we came up with Jesus.
Yeah.
Huh.
Because, boy, it's been how long since I studied Latin when I was a freshman in high school. And I never really took to Greek. Greek, it's Yesu. That's where you get the E in the sound, and that got carried over into the English, which is where we end up with it.
Right.
And all the, the Spanish and the Portuguese and all the, Latin languages.
Yeah.
But fortunately, he knows who we're talking about.
Well, and it is. We don't know 100%, but this is considered a theophany or an appearance of God in the Old Testament, where it's probably Jesus is well, I guess not from God's perspective, because God is outside of time, but from our perspective, this is Jesus appearing before.
Yeah.
I mean, thousands of years before the New Testament.
That's
right.
why commentary said
That it's
reincarnate.
reincarnate.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Right, Brad?
absolutely. And I like to try to use the
Well,
earlier.
why
Yeah.
is it Jesus instead of God? In that appearance.
Because, well, they never really say God. The Jews,
Well, they said Lord, which is the W.
yeah, that the closest they ever come to saying God is Adonai, which means Lord, and they use a whole bunch of different names, which we end up translating as God.
Well, if this is the case, does that mean that Jesus is the commander of God's army?
Well, yeah.
Which is interesting.
Which is how we see him when he comes back.
Back in Revelation, yeah. Or as the described.
Yeah, he will. When he comes back, he is going to come back at the head of his army, and it's going to be an ugly time.
Yeah.
For all of those people who don't belong to him.
Well, I mean, there is that parable of the, what is it, the ruler who goes away. And Jesus is talking about himself, I guess, of the ruler that goes away. And then there are people that didn't want him to be king that,
well,
I guess, tried to rebel while he was away. Then he comes back and.
Well, you know, the ruler who goes away and leaves people in charge, and the people that he leaves in charge, well, they decide they're going to keep it, and the king sends servants back to get stuff, and they end up killing the servants, and then they says he's gonna respect ends up sending his son back, and they kill his son, and he comes back and just kills a lot of them.
I think well, that's also a parable, but that's the vineyard, right?
Yeah.
That's the vineyard.
Yeah.
There are a lot of parables that are very similar to,
Yeah.
There are people who, and I guess it's tolerated for a certain amount of time, the people that don't want, the people get to make their decision and then live with their decision, I guess.
God tells us that he will put up with it for a while, and the day will come when he's not going to put up with it any longer. And he promises it will be a surprise. But like I say, it's one of the reasons that I like to go back to the more Hebrewish names, because it gives me a more, I like, you're called William. I was always called Bill. I like it when somebody calls me Bill, because that's really the label that I have carried all of my life.
I thought you were going to say you want people to call you Wilhelm.
No, but if I went to Spain, a Spaniard would want to call me Guillermo. I don't want anybody to call me Guillermo.
Don't go to Spain.
There you go. But I mean, I would want the Spanish people to call me Bill.
Yeah.
And I just think Yah would like for me to call him that.
Yeah.
And now, since we actually have these translations available to us to let us know what it was originally, I had the ability.
This is kind of on the same topic, but sort of. But
Uh-huh.
Aren't there Christians who call? Do Arabic Christians call God Allah?
Yeah. Well,
Right. Some, or like if you converted,
probably. I'm
people who converted from Islam to Christianity, or I've heard people say that. Because
probably,
it's the name for God,
yeah.
but it's kind of like the English name for God. It's not. Was God the word God? Did that come? I mean, that's an English word, but
I
was
would
that
not
some
be
other?
surprised at what they continue to call him Allah.
Yeah. But was God the name? But so the word God used to describe Yahweh, or Yah.
The
But was the word God brought from some sort of pagan?
El
No.
El has been a noun used for God for a long millennia.
Huh.
We
But we still use the word God. I mean,
we use the word God, but that's only been, a couple thousand years maybe.
So in the beginning, God. There you go.
No,
I mean, in the beginning, God.
in the
yeah.
beginning, Elohim.
Yeah.
If if you want to open that book, it's well, I can't say it in Hebrew, but the word they use is Elohim, and which is a plural noun.
But I'm sure that God, see, I'm using the word again because it's just the word that we use, I guess. But I'm sure.
And
Adonai or
there's
El,
nothing wrong.
knows what we're talking about,
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
like,
I mean, yeah, he knows what we're talking about, but it can lead people to an odd concept, because God,
well,
like Allah, the Muslims have a problem with Christians because they think Christians are polytheistic because we believe in the Trinity. So they view us as worshiping three gods instead of us worshiping three natures of one God.
but also I didn't want to kind of maybe muddy the water a little more,
Okay.
but not too much. Well, hopefully this doesn't muddy the water, but I guess adds texture to the water. Color
Okay.
to the
The
water.
more the merrier.
In English, we just use the word love.
Oh yeah,
But the
which
Bible
is just terrible.
The Bible uses many different words for love,
Yes.
but it's all translated as love.
Yeah. Which is very which is very cloudy at best.
Right. So that but that's what I see as when we use the word God. The Bible has many words You know, like Elohim means one thing, Adonai kind of means another thing. Means the same thing, but a slightly different context to use that word.
Oh, well, no, not really. Adonai means Lord.
But Elohim translates to something else. It means like
And Elohim means,
council or something.
Mhm.
It is like a plural word, right?
yes, Elohim is definitely a plural form, like God of hosts.
I mean, the closest thing we have is like we say Lord.
Of hosts.
Yeah. Well, that's what this says
It's
here.
definitely a combination plural noun.
Yeah.
Most of the words that Hebrews use for the
Does this say
words
Lord of hosts in some translations here?
could be.
Because a host is a
The English people are very bad about the way they translate the word God.
is when it says heavenly hosts in the Bible, it's talking about
Angels.
army of angels.
Yeah.
Uh,
The way people translate God is
abhorrent.
is very bad because it just really does
Yeah.
not give us the flavor of the flavor
Yeah.
of what the Hebrews intended to convey in Scripture.
But there are different names and like reflection of God's character
Yeah,
and his nature.
and that's very, 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 very important to the Hebrews.
Yeah.
The Hebrews to the Hebrews, words are powerful. That's why, and that's one of the things that this story conveys.
Yeah.
It's one of the meanings of this story is that words are powerful. It's a subtext for this story is the power of words. And that's why names are so important. Why things occur. People are renamed in the scriptures.
Yeah.
And there is a particular meaning for the name that they are given.
Well, and Joshua doesn't worship this entity until he, this guy, because at the beginning it just seems like Joshua sees just kind of an impressive looking guy with a sword.
That's right.
And like, oh, I want him on my side. He just kind of asks, like, are you for those guys or for us?
I thought he was, or I assumed that he was talking to a guy that was leading a bunch of men.
No,
Oh,
no, he's not leading anybody.
oh, okay. Interesting.
This fellow just shows up.
Okay.
All of a sudden, this fellow was just there outside of Jericho.
Well, Joshua was contemplating what to do, I guess.
Yep. And he lifted his eyes, and there, all of a sudden, in front of him, is this guy with a drawn sword. And Joshua went over to him and asked, are you on our side or their side? And this guy said, no. But I am the commander of Adonai's army, and I have come just now. And that's when Joshua's bowels kind of loosened a little bit, and he fell down on the ground and worshiped.
He's rather evasive of his privacy.
Wow.
It was at that moment that he felt the power
Yeah.
that was emanating from this individual, and he fell down and worshiped him.
But it was only after he heard the name that it kind of hit. Because it was only after he got the answer. Because it's almost like he's just kind of asking, like, who are you? Are you with us or them? And he said, no, I'm the commander of the Lord's army. Then he falls down.
That's right. I think I would be,
And we know it's not an angel because the angel would have picked him up and go like, oh yeah, don't worship me, worship
that's
worship
right.
God. I'm not God. I'm just here to,
Set you straight.
or the angel would have said, don't be afraid,
Yeah,
but this guy doesn't say,
doesn't say that.
don't be afraid.
Uh,
He says, take your feet off.
Take your
shoes off.
yeah, I'll take your
feet off.
I'll fix you later.
The importance of so I did make a note that's kind of interesting about this whole destruction of Jericho and the wall thing. And I'm going to try to stop using the word thing when I can't think of the word. But
Okay.
Anyway, God has them do a physical act, walking around this wall. But God actually uses an invisible spiritual weapon to destroy the wall. And I mean, again, I think it's interesting, the sound. This also kind of takes faith, because I've heard people kind of rationalize that, well, the vibration was just right, and they hit the right tone with all these ram's horns.
The resonant frequency of the
The
wall.
resonant frequency of all these horns blowing at once, and what the people walking, bump, 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 I guess that's the sound that they would make when they walk.
Yeah.
A million people walking around a bill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you're likely to hit the resonant frequency of a pile of bricks and cause it to do anything but sit there.
But it's still within the realm of, like, you could still kind of be like, well, okay, maybe they hit the resonant
It's
frequency
just enough to
that
that people can gloss over it without, it's enough to nod along to and continue. Yeah, but there would need to be a much deeper explanation for it to be a true explanation.
But I guess either way, I mean,
In that way.
I believe God worked through, either knew that this sound was going to bring the wall down, or brought the wall down and had them do this kind of thing that seemed a little bit ridiculous. Well, there is an aspect.
That's what I was saying earlier.
Yeah.
Was I was taking for granted that the whole wall coming down thing and the horn trumpet blowing was just like a trust exercise, basically.
It does kind of seem like that, right? Like,
Yeah, because like what I was saying, that's what I meant when I said like they had to do their part and kind of trust the process, and then God apparently did his part. But
Yeah.
first they had to trust the process. They had to overcome their fear to like attack. So they had
Yeah.
to, commit to action, and then had to continue that with faith that that action would be fruitful.
well,
It's something that, we see here. We see Jesus in all the stuff he does. It's um, Jesus is when he heals people. Uh, what do I have to do to be healed? Well, pick up your mat.
Well, I did. It's funny you should mention that because I made a note about the bud in the eye.
Yep.
Jesus never healed somebody the same way like twice, and I think
Yeah.
I kind of see that as being like there's no formula, because if God did the same thing the
Well,
same
at least
way, we could kind of reduce it to a formula. Like, if we hit this frequency, we can
Right.
kill our
Well,
enemies or something.
I think that does keep the kind of mysticism of what was going on there fresh. Even if that wasn't the purpose or not. But I mean, wasn't there at least one time where he healed a bunch of people? Like spent some time healing a bunch of people, and it's not directly described how. So
Well, there are several times he heals bunches of people.
yeah.
And it
So I
doesn't
mean, I'm
explain
sure
how.
that he did do some repeats.
Well, I guess
It's just,
the common thread was the faith of the person.
Yeah.
Because there was somebody that said, "Oh, you don't even have to come to my house; just say the word, and my
yeah.
servant
His son
will."
would be his
There's the
son would
one
be
that
healed.
touched his
I thought it was his son at home.
son, or well, then there's the
The
daughter
servant.
that was healed, the servant,
The servant of the centurion.
yeah, the servant of the centurion.
Um, you have to have faith. You gotta have faith. I don't have to be there.
But then sometimes they,
And it depends on what point Jesus was wanting to make.
yeah,
Uh, you know, Jesus healed bunches or individuals, and the formula was never the same.
well, there was the whole, mud in the eyes, the blind guy, and Jesus spit on the ground and made some mud and put it in the guy's eyes and said, "Go and wash in the pool."
Oh yeah.
And then there was the this wasn't a healing, but this was a miracle. The Who was it, Peter, that came and said, the temple people want the tax,
Yeah.
and he said instead of just producing a coin out of, like, oh, hey, that's the thing. He could have just said like, "Hey, what's behind your ear?" Like
Yeah.
a magician. But he said, no, go to the pond, or what was it?
Go to the
Go to the lake or whatever.
go to the lake and
Throw
get a fish.
and the first fish you catch, there's gonna be a
Coin,
coin in its mouth.
Oh yeah, go get those fish and random fish out of the lake, and he'll have a coin, and it'll pay your taxes.
So then that begs the question. I mean, it does make you think: did God create the coin in the fish as it was being pulled out, or was the coin already in the fish's mouth, and God knew that the coin was in the fish's mouth and knew that the
Yeah.
Peter would get that fish. How did it work? Or are we not meant to know?
Yeah, but the whole thing is, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Ended up, the coin was there, the taxes were paid.
Well, just like if God tells you to dig a hole in your back, you know, if you're praying for
$1 million
$1
and you
million
dig a hole in your
to-
backyard and it's there.
yeah, you know, was it there all along and God told you, you know, or did God create the
Did he create it right before I got down to the 4 feet deep or?
right,
He prepares it as needed.
prepares
Yeah.
it as needed? Yeah.
Um,
But I guess does God edit? And this might be a little bit off topic, but it's always something I've kind of wondered. How did God? Because I think that's why some people go to the whole simulation thing, is because very often this seems like God kind of changes some code, and you know, we hit the thing and the mushroom comes out, and you know, the Mario reference.
we open the door and the Easter eggs there.
Yeah, you know, but yeah, this whole thing with using this, I mean, this has happened now with the ram's horns, but wasn't there another instance where they broke some glass jars and something? And was that David? Where they broke a bunch of? They were in some kind of battle, and somebody got the idea to break a bunch of glass jars.
Well, that's not immediately springing to my mind.
Maybe it was David. I don't know.
I'm not recalling that right off.
But I would assume that the Hebrews that were marching around Jericho and blowing the trumpet didn't know that you could make sound break stuff, like on a small level.
Yeah, I can't
Do you think they
imagine
had to be
somebody
opera
blowing a
singers?
shofar ever,
Like break a
ever
glass
broke
with
a
your voice?
glass. I don't think so. But
But the Egyptians kind of did stuff. The Egyptians kind of did.
no, the
Did little
Egyptians
kind
did
of
a whole lot of weird techie stuff.
Yeah.
But the what's
But even then, why march around 10 times? You know, what was it, 7 times? You know,
seven
why?
times?
If the sound of the horns brought the walls down, why march around?
Wasn't the horns.
Yeah,
Wasn't the horns. It was
exactly.
all of the people yelling.
Yeah.
And then they had to walk straight ahead into the city and kill every man, woman, child, dog, donkey, everything.
Except for Rahab and her family.
Except for Rahab and her family.
Yeah.
Now, that, after you have seen this city completely collapse in front of you, you go out there, you circle this city, you watch this big fortified city completely fall in front of your eyes, and then you walk straight in front of you and you are commanded to kill everything that draws breath.
Yeah.
Now, it's important, I think, for people to think about that for a minute, or maybe 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Because this is God's command.
Not only that, if this was Jesus in the Old Testament. I mean,
Yeah,
we associate, and
He-
somebody recently said to me, like, well, he's the Prince of Peace. And I was like, well, yes, he is the Prince of Peace. That's one of his titles, but that doesn't mean,
look how he got peace.
yeah.
He got peace by slaughtering all of his enemies. You know, that's the reason he did it, the reason that was done is to keep his people pure.
Well, and this is something I think that's people often look at the New Testament and the Old Testament, the way God acts. And I am kind of reminded in this topic of, God doesn't act, when God is performing miracles, God doesn't act in the same way, I'm trying to think of where I was going with this, but I think we can get overly simplified and reduce God to like, oh, God only, I mean, God is about love and peace, and but we can kind of have those ideas, those labels, and assume it means, well, God just tolerates everything. Or God, there's no, because I think people think like, well, the God in the New Testament is this way, and the God in the Old Testament is this way, but they're really the same, But
When I
You know.
pastored that little rural church, there was one lady who just very frankly said that she could not believe in the God of the Old Testament. She believed in Jesus, she loved him, but she could not believe in the God of the Old Testament. And
I think people get around that by saying, well, that's God the Father, but it's also Jesus.
And I could not communicate to her that the God of the Old Testament was Jesus. I could not help her understand that Jesus was the God of the Old Testament. She just could not grasp that.
Doesn't that make it more miraculous too, how Jesus willingly sacrificed himself? You have a God that's all about justice, and he sacrifices himself for, I don't know. I mean, I think that also kind of makes it even stronger point. And God's love for us, because God wasn't
he pays our price.
God wasn't doing it from a point of weakness, but from a point of strength. Like, I could have. God had every right to, destroy everything basically, but he chose mercy instead and offered us a chance where we didn't deserve a chance, but we got a chance.
I look at it today and I think about her, and I think about what a shock she has coming when she opens her eyes in heaven and realizes that God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit are all one. And how she,
Well, I guess the shocking thing for some people might be people sometimes associate, and I guess what I was getting at, some people sometimes associate Jesus as being, oh, he's the peaceful side of God. But that's not necessarily, he's the warm, fuzzy side.
yeah,
That's not necessarily true.
no,
I mean,
no, he is, he
loving,
is,
but he's not warm, fuzzy. I mean, he can be warm and fuzzy, but
he is
towards his
the,
children, I guess. But
he is the perfection of the God in the Old Testament. And we can't see that in the very short period of time that he was here. 3 years. 3 years is all he showed himself here. That's all. Just 3 years.
well, his ministry that he.
Well, that's all he showed us of his perfection on earth. All the rest of it was prep time.
Well, during the prep time, he was still living as somebody should, I would say.
He was
Living a good
preparing.
human life.
Yeah, he was living a good human life,
Yeah.
but he didn't become the Messiah until John baptized him.
Yeah.
And he started his ministry. He did his perfection time for 3 years to show us what it was to be God incarnate on earth. And then he rose, and before his disciple John died, he wrote that book to give us a little glance of what's to come.
Revelation. Well, it is interesting.
And look at how he shows himself coming back.
Well, it is interesting that you kind of get these bookends. Like you get Jesus in the Old Testament, kind of the Sodom and Gomorrah appearance before with Abraham, this appearance with Joshua in the fire with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These very I'm with you in the battle, I'm with you in the fire, and then you get Jesus in the New Testament, the Messiah that,
The Messiah.
I mean, he said, if I wanted to, I could lead an army and, just take everything, but that's not my mission now.
Yeah.
And then you have Revelation, So I think they all kind of, I mean, each one is true, but I think they strengthen each other as a whole. You got to look at all of them. I mean, there are a lot of concepts in the Bible where you can kind of, and this could even be true with things in Proverbs, where it could say, don't be, two things can be true, I guess, like don't be hasty and miss the way. And then on the other hand, it could be, there's another proverb that says, don't be lazy, get off your tail and go out there, and both are true, but it's not like you can just go with one. Be like,
You're
well,
absolutely right. You have to get up and you have to go and
yeah. It seems like God designed the universe that way. Like you can't just like it's hard to get a formula like, okay, I always do this all the time and it always works this way.
he
Well,
intended.
Well, that gets back to how everything is always a compromise. Because
yeah, you do have to weigh
situations are
everything.
always slightly different.
Yeah.
Things are always slightly different from before, or almost always, because everything's kind of like on a sliding scale. So then you have to be a little bit individualized with how you address everything. Can't fit every or
Yeah.
situation boxes, something like that.
Well,
God requires us to think according to our abilities. God requires
On that topic,
sorry. God requires more intelligent people to think more than lesser intelligent people.
I mean, he still loves them all the same, but
Yeah, he loves them all the same. But
on that topic, I was doing some thinking over here.
yeah,
as an intelligent person.
Maybe or not, but I was trying. While you guys were talking about the three parts of God came up, right? The God the Father, God the Holy,
Yeah.
Jesus, Holy Ghost, Holy Spirit. And it just got me thinking, that's a common discussion that happens, or almost every time that's brought up, it's someone has a question about it, and I've never heard it fully explained, right? And I'm going to go so far at the moment to say that that's because it's inexplicable. Usually the explanation is that we're not able to really comprehend that fully as humans. But it just got me thinking how that concept of like it remains somewhat inexplicable to a degree, always inspiring discussion and thought. That's similar. It's leaving mystery. There's a sense of awe there, room for interpretation. You get the sense that there's some unknown there, right? And always will be. So it's something to kind of gnaw at with your mind a bit, and it inspires you to thought. I think that's the same with kind of relationships with people, right? If you knew any one person in like entirety, would you, this is kind of maybe an odd jump, but I have like a whole little loop of thoughts here. Like if one of the reasons we find it interesting to talk to people is because, or the reason that we have relationships with people or believe in people or anything like that is because there's some mystery to those people, or there's like I've talked a while back about my theory of like, we have to believe in something, and we can only really believe in we derive meaning from a belief in chosen how did I phrase it? What appear to be relative infinities. And in that I mean like not completely able to be understood. Like the depth of a person, if you talk to a person, they're a relative infinity to you. Like relatively speaking, it's kind of you can't know every thought that that person has. So it's interesting to talk to people because, you know, they represent an unknown. There's some mystery there in some way. And then also, you know, so that's the same thing here, how God is portrayed in three parts. It's like a very built-in way to keep that discussion and mystery going. And then that kind of is the opposite of the way that we've been moving as humans, transitioning from like this kind of belief and having like being surrounded by unknowns, which inspire thought and belief and like, oh, that's interesting and, you know, awe-inspiring. And how does the weather work? That's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, but we're moving from like belief to data because we actually have the ability to quantify almost everything at this point, at least. And I think that's leading to like a kind of systematic loss of belief of humans in living. Because, you know, you guys all remember the days when you'd sit around and have conversations about things that you can now, but then that changed when Google happened.
Yeah.
Right? It's no longer as interesting to talk about things because you can just Google the answer. You don't have discussions about random stuff that often or nearly as often when the answer's right in front of you. And that's not as fun. That's not as interesting. And then, yeah, so I think humans not inspired by facts. I think we're motivated by
Don't
what
get one of those implants
see
in
in
your
that.
brain.
Huh?
So don't get one of those implants in your brain. So that
Well,
that's another topic.
that would greatly increase your ability to, in theory, to like the transfer rate between you and all of the knowledge of humans anyway, which
Well, so some people believe that that is the. Do you think that's the mark of the beast? Getting implants?
I mean, but that's kind of silly because that would be like it's just a matter of degrees, right? Because this right here, the cell phone, is the same exact thing. The only difference is literally the only difference is the fact that like the connection between my brain and all the data here is this slow rate of data transfer that requires like the data to go to be translated into visual format and then into my brain into like a format that I can understand. There's already a data link here. It's just very slow right now. So when
Well,
you put
I guess one difference is you can't
it's
be
just
hacked.
gonna.
Yeah.
What's that?
Well, I mean, it can influence your brain, but you can't.
Yeah.
I guess one concern I had, you know, is that it would take, and this is kind of the argument, is that it would take from your free will. Well, the phone already,
It already does
the
that.
algorithms and stuff already do
It's just a
influence
matter
it,
of
but I meant
degrees.
like
Yeah.
more directly, like somebody could
I mean,
from
when the
their
phone,
house
these
and
15,
you
the
know
15-second videos,
yeah, well, I meant like
that has
from your house in
definitely
Tokyo
testably
that they
influenced
could.
people.
What's that?
Like the 15-second video thing. Like that's definitively, testably influenced people's brains. It's influenced our behavior,
Yeah.
like our attention spans, like, you know, and the way the scrolling and all that, it has a direct effect on our brains. It's already a thing. It's just what I'm saying is it's just a matter of degrees. So it would feel kind of a bit silly to me to like say point at one specific thing and say that's the mark because we're already there. We're already
Like I couldn't use a joystick and like make you raise your
cyborgs.
arm like immediately, you know,
No, but you could display like some sort of pattern maybe
and make well, yeah,
that
that, yeah.
influences my brain in a way, right?
I mean,
That's
yeah, it is a degree thing, but
yeah.
you know, you're still like you can still go into the Amazon jungle and go off the grid and be
Yeah. Well, one of the important things that I see here is that, you know, even though we do have the availability of walking dogs.
yes. Should we take an intermission?
What time? Oh, it's that time, isn't
It's
it?
10 p.m.
Uh,
I had a couple of applications from this too.
Okay, we
but-
need to come back to this because there are a
Yes.
couple of things that I would like to say, I believe.
I subtly allowed us to drift. I do apologize.
And because there are a couple of things that I would like to say
Yeah.
concerning this that I think are relevant.
And I have a couple of proverbs that use the imagery of walls around the city, and that shows this the importance of the symbolism with that.
Okay.
And an application, kind of looking at this on a spiritual level, spiritual stronghold. That's kind of where I was going to go to.
Okay.
So
Go walk your dog and get back.
So we'll probably be another 15 minutes when I get back.
Okay.
And, I'll go ahead and pause the recording, I think.
Okay.
And,
You
or I
okay?
might stop the recording, then do another recording. That might be better.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I think, well, let me say one more thing before I forget. That just occurred to me is like, that's why games are fun. Like chess or any
What?
strategy
Like
games or,
Games are fun.
yeah, are you all, is it difficult to understand me?
It was
I
just
heard
that
that.
one time.
I heard that.
Oh, okay.
Well, you are thousands of miles away, so there's a bit of a lag.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm 7,000 miles away, you know,
Wow.
as a crow flies, if it can fly through the earth. Like
As the word
3.5 of 3.14 times that. Anyway, I guess so but yeah, like any kind of games, right? Like strategy games, I mean,
Mhm.
almost everything involves some sort of strategy, right? It's your interpretation. It's like a game to your brain. It's like your brain's favorite thing to do is try to, well, that's not odd at all. It's designed to survive, right? So it wants to figure out how to do things best, essentially, right? It wants to figure things out. Its job is literally, it exists to figure things out. So when you throw something in front of it that it can't quite figure out, you know, it keeps your attention. And, you know, that's why, like,
Whoops.
that's why, like, playing chess, or I mean, I'm not an avid chess player. I actually find it interesting to watch it occasionally, but
Really?
you know, yeah, but you know, strategy games, I play strategy games on the computer, and
Mhm.
those are interesting because there are so many different possible strategies that you could employ, so many different variables to move around and play with, that it's intrinsically interesting. But if someone were to, like, in theory, right? So let's say life is a strategy game, because it is. Okay. And say you're in this strategy game where you start out with you're playing as a certain civilization which has different attributes. So you've got, like, which is very similar to a person, right? So say you're a person in life, right? Which we all are. Okay. But a strategy game is somewhat less complex. It's less complex enough that in theory, relatively soonish, AI would be able to run the trillions of different possible combinations. That, like, it could figure out the most optimal way to play through the whole game from the start, like the most optimal. If you did anything different, it wouldn't be as good, down to the smallest microscopic detail. Now, how interesting would that game be anymore? Because then it's like, that's the
Everything's
answer.
really-
You
No
know,
more
how
curiosity.
interesting would life be if a computer could just say, this is the most optimal way to play life. If you do anything else, you suck, essentially. Like,
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah. Certainly wouldn't be interesting.
It's just an interesting thought, I think, which kind of
I think
shines
we
the
were
light.
built. I think we were built to want to
Need
discover.
Yeah,
I don't see how you can be alive and alert and not want to be challenged and expand your knowledge.
yeah. I think
I
almost
think,
everybody wants to learn things that, I mean, that they're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make,
Hard part is when you have
I
to
think it'd
learn
be tough to
something.
say there's anybody that's interested in nothing.
Hmm.
I think that's why God created us the way he did. Uh, I don't know that I have ever known anyone who wasn't interested in something.
Right.
And God has provided us with, at this point in time, a book which has given us a snapshot of the basics of knowing him.
Yeah, I think to me, like, I've mentioned before that I think the Bible is and I didn't come up with this theory myself. It just really makes a lot of sense to me that the Bible is, a collective resource of the wisdom of thousands of generations of people, essentially. Um, One way or another, it's certainly like an excellent teacher on how to live life,
Mm-hmm.
right? And to me, um, that's kind of why, to me, like whether or not I believe in God, which I still can't say that yes I believe anything, but I believe that God as represented in the Bible is relatively synonymous with truth, because like you can literally just exchange the two words in any conversation almost, um, because it is a kind of instruction book on how to live, deduced from the experience of millions of people, really, throughout history. Um, Whether inspired by God or not, but yeah, it's like kind of a roadmap to life.
Mm-hmm. I don't see how we can know God without it.
I think it is one of the reasons that gives me pause and causes me to think that there is a God associated with this book, is because in the time I have spent on this planet, I have come to, I guess it's because I want to believe that there is a concept of justice in the world and in the universe. I don't believe that it is just strictly entropy and that the universe is just striving toward a march toward chaos, and
Well,
I believe that there is striving toward a just universe. But if there is such a thing as justice in the universe, there is required a set of absolute rules in the universe. And one way I see that is through the structures that we find in the physical universe. And I look at all of the constants that we have in physics and chemistry and cosmology. The list of numbers that, if they were off even 2 or 3 hundredths of a percent, would completely skew our universe from being able to have life as we know it.
yeah, and I appreciate that perspective or argument. But I mean, there is always that other argument, like if you say you had a 1,000 petri dishes full of different environments, all of which were hostile to life except for one, and then life grew up in that petri dish, and then said, well, this petri dish must have been created specifically for me because I exist here. When in reality, it was just, that was the only petri dish there it was possible for it to exist. You know, just like the argument, like, why do we exist on Earth and the solar system? It seems like the solar system, everything we see around us is created just for us. But we wouldn't be here to say that if, you know, well, first of all, this almost exact same conditions should exist just mathematically, like billions of other places in the universe. Because, you know, you've got, what is it, 100 million stars in the 100 million stars in the Milky Way. And then there are like 15, I don't know, maybe I'm pulling the wrong number out, but like there are at least like 2 trillion galaxies visible in the known universe. And the known universe is like, they think maybe it's like 15% of the volume of the actual universe.
Maybe, yeah.
Wow.
So, like, just the math says, you know, conditions such as Earth will happen. You know,
Yeah.
just by random chance, we should be here. So that argument kind of falls apart when you look at it from random chance, in my mind, which isn't fun to think about, but
Well, I think it's fun to think about.
yeah, yeah, I mean, it is fun to think. I too want to believe things are here for a reason.
I think that whether we are the only ones or one
But in my,
of a billion.
yeah, in my mind, my desire to believe something makes me more critical of it, though.
I just, I admit to my bias desiring a just universe.
Well, I mean, it is just. Our concept of justice, I think, is created by us. But I mean, it is true on average that if you do great things in your life or whatever, you will be rewarded on average accordingly. There are certainly outliers, super rich people that by most arguments didn't deserve it, and super poor people that by most arguments deserve much more. But on average, it's 100. I would argue that it's 100% true that, like, if you were to graph every human on a graph that says like effort and success in life, there would be a definite trend line that, effort and success in life positively correlate.
Oh. Yeah.
Or directly correlate. And to me, that does say that, justice does exist. Like truth exists, or facts exist, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah.
And, I look at that and believing in a just universe, I believe that there will be a balancing of the scales. And that's something I hope for. And that's just what I want to write into my concept of the universe. And what I find in the Bible is a moral universe that fits my concept of a universe structured in that manner. And I embrace that kind of structure. I choose to believe that way.
Yeah.
And the experiences that I have had in living tend to support that. And I encourage the people that I know and love to share my living in that manner, because I find that successful. Because I find that successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree. The Bible is, I don't think you could do too much better than being a disciple of the Bible, for lack of better words. But it just occurred to me while I was sitting here listening to you that one of the primary reasons for speaking in parables, and interesting perspective on the Bible, is that it's a compression codec, like data compression. Like telling a story is a distillation of a lot of different lessons. A lot of data you can take a lot of different lessons out of a story. Mm-hmm. And use very few words for that story, essentially. But then you can take a myriad of lessons from that story, and maybe a myriad of lessons went into the creation of that story. So it's almost like data compression. Like if you tell a story, you've really told 1,000 facts, or like or 1,000 lessons, kind of.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a big reason why parables are used, is because it's like a data compression device.
ECD.
Yeah.
I mean, just
Yeah, a
sounds
picture
really
tells
good.
1,000 words. A
Mhm.
story tells 1,000 lessons. Because in theory, that story is taken from real life, so you can like look at all the different, you know, um, things we
So
learn
many
from real
cultures,
life.
so many cultures use stories
Yeah,
to keep that thread going through their heritage.
yeah, because well, stories in this case, stories summarize a lot of lessons learned
Mm-hmm.
by people. So a lot of wisdom is summarized in a story. Then you can use that to teach. That's interesting. That's very interesting. The
Look
fact
at
that you can
Aesop's
summarize
fables.
so many different, like you can even a made up story, um, like you can use it to summarize so many different lessons, and then pass that story along to the next generation in a
Mm-hmm.
much data compressed format, and for that next generation to uncompress.
Easier to remember, to recall.
Yeah, yeah, and it's way easier to recall. Not only because it's a lot less data, but it's because it's a story,
And songs were used too.
like an understandable concept.
Mhm. Music and songs were used a lot, still are, to tell stories in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
because it paints a picture, like you just said, and um, pictures 1,000 words, and what we do with stories and songs is we are painting this imaginary canvas in our minds. So we have this flow of this storyline going through our mind, just like watching a movie. And the more we listen and watch this movie in our mind, the more we can glean from that context presented to us.
Yeah, and the more that it's bothered me for a long time, kind of the fact that like I've read a lot of books throughout my life. Um, and it's kind of bothered me that, I don't remember 99% of most of what I've read. But, the constant ideas and concepts presented in those books kind of, they do, they change the way you think, which means that they change the structure of your brain basically by reinforcing certain pathways. So even if you don't remember every word of what you've read, it has, in theory, changed your brain some. So it still sticks around with you somewhat.
Absolutely.
Heavy stuff.
Which would also apply to the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's important, and it's something I don't do enough, is listening to the Bible. I listen to excerpts from the Bible, and I want to do it more. YouVersion of the Bible has a number of different translations available to listen to. But Um, I want to listen to it more because it does imprint itself and cause the structure of our brain to help affect us. And you had some notes.
Oh, yes. Were you all able to sustain the?
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
That's good. I'll have to,
They brought some interesting
I
ideas.
always watch our video. I'll have to watch this.
Yes.
Proverbs. Okay, so Walt.
I didn't detect any sarcasm with the always watch the videos.
I always watch them in their entirety.
Yes. Slow motion, I'm sure.
In my dreams. No.
Yeah.
Somebody's watching them. You're watching.
Mhm.
I do watch them because I also put I try to put the chapter, which I don't know. Anyway, but I don't know if I did all the chapters last time, but I try to generally organize it by topic, you know,
Mhm.
10, 15-minute sections, but we jump around so much, it's kind of hard to
Yeah.
sometimes.
Sometimes
You'd have to like edit things back into previous sections or something.
That'll take too much time. But
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like if you were to try to perfectly organize it or something, you'd have to chop it all up, put it back together in different order.
yeah. Speaking of which, walls and the importance of, well, so there's walls are seen as a positive because you have the book of Nehemiah where they talk about rebuilding the wall around Jerusalem and the importance of that for defense and as a symbol of being a, well, being a people. I mean, having a border, you know, I mean, just like in our own life, having boundaries, having borders is a good thing. And there's a proverb that talks about self-control, and that is 25:28. And I did a little video on the yesterday, I think. And we flip to Proverbs 20. I could quote it, but I want to get it exact. 25:28. This is a proverb of Solomon. A man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. So you think about cities with walls around them in the ancient world, you had gates. You know, the walls enabled you to have gates to where you could control who comes in, who goes out, when they come in, when they come out, you know. And 18, so that's a positive way of looking at walls. But then you also have, which I think this kind of applies more to Jericho in the Proverbs 18:11. A rich man's wealth. So, okay, well, I'll read 18:10 through 11. How about that?
Okay.
The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous man runs into it and is safe. Verse 11, a rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high wall in his imagination. So, and here it's talking about God as being, you know, a strong refuge and a wall around it, kind of like the wall around Jericho. It gave them this false sense of security because they were trusting in their wall. Whereas the Hebrews were trusting in God. So So it really was a test of faith, and you know, because the Jerichoites were in there, you know, entrenched in there behind, and people were actually living in the wall. The wall was so thick. This was a thick, high wall that, you know, was almost impenetrable, and they were really trusting in that wall. Yeah. You know, the Hebrews were asked to march around the city and to do this kind of bizarre thing, and to trust that God was going to somehow bring this wall down that was very, I mean, if you would have looked at it, you would have thought there's no way this thing's going to come down. So
Yeah, it's kind of like the people that, like, say you're running into that tower that is God, right?
Yeah.
You know, you're putting faith in the structure that's surrounding you to protect you from something,
right,
fence, outdoor enemies, something like that. And in life, that would be, you know, you're taking the advice of the Bible, following the instructions in the Bible, which is a collection of solutions to how to navigate life, and trusting that life's not going to beat you up as much because you're going to survive better, because you're trusting in solutions that have been worked out and are presented to you.
well,
So
and I guess
you're armored against the, like,
yeah,
bad part, you know, bad things, travesties of life. I was trying to avoid being
yeah. And I think too that
fancy.
walls that might seem secure that aren't good to trust in might be something like wealth, because it does provide, you know, it is kind of like the physical wall around Jericho. I mean, a city does need a wall, but it's also, you're trusting in something that can be broken. You know, like wealth can be gained and lost. You know, it's
Yeah. Well, and the Bible speaks a lot about, you know, if you follow the teachings of the Bible, then you'll be successful and wealthy. It actually says that,
yeah,
you know, multiple points. And so, like, kind of build your, I mean, wealth is, very
it's not
simply
a bad
speaking,
thing.
a good insulation to problems in life. I mean, it's certainly good at, like, if you've got $1 billion, you have a very large capacity to deal with problems compared to somebody that's got $100. So if you, like, follow the teachings and
Well, it also says that it doesn't protect you from, you know, you're still going to, you're still going to physically die no matter how much money you have, and you're still going to have to wrestle with, like, the mortality of your physical body, and you can't take the wealth with. I mean, yeah, it does. There are certainly benefits to wealth. I mean, and I mean,
you can't take wealth with you, but wealth does give you the ability to
yeah,
influence events to a greater degree on average.
yeah,
I mean, there's
yeah,
still outliers in that conversation. You could still say, well, this poor person had this huge effect like Gandhi or something, right? But on
yeah,
average, by far and away, the wealthier you are, the greater effect you can possibly have on the sequence of events that transpires on Earth, which you can take away after you die. That still does exist. So,
yeah. That's a pretty big conversation.
yeah.
Um, and so I just wanted to highlight just that those are just two examples of the Bible using this concept of walls around a city, and you know, just also how one thing like a wall could have, I mean, it's a symbol of security, but it's also a symbol You know, if you're basing it's also a symbol of, if it's a man-made wall, it's, you know, a symbol of, it could be like a false sense of security. And it, you know, there are a lot of ways to go with that, I guess, but maybe
Well-
you can wrap that in a bow. I don't
Well,
try to,
the Bible talks about strongholds and
Strongholds, yeah.
well,
Yeah.
two different ways. One,
Maybe
it is a place in which you find refuge,
yeah.
a place of protection. But then strongholds are also places that are bad, that hold difficult areas that cause you harm, that are areas in your life that are negative effects that you have built walls inside yourself, and bad habits, bad thoughts, bad parts of your character, which have become strongholds in yourself, and you have to tear down these barriers within yourself to rid yourself of these habits.
Well, and you also need God's help to bring down.
Yes, you desperately need to utilize aid from the Holy Spirit to tear down these strongholds, to free yourself from these detrimental habits that imprison you.
Well, and I did kind of find this as an interesting example.
sermon.
I was looking at,
Sounds like a good start of a sermon there.
yeah. Well, I mean, it is. You know,
Like there in Proverbs 25, verse 26, like a muddied spring or a polluted well is a righteous person who gives way before the wicked.
yeah.
You know, you may
That's
have
another
good
image.
thoughts. You may have good thoughts, but if you don't stand
Yeah.
against that wickedness, it doesn't matter whether you have good thoughts or not. If you don't take a stand, you're worthless.
Yeah.
So
That's when you, I'm sorry?
so actions and effects matter.
Yes. And that gets back to that, what is it, Ephesians 6:10, put on the whole armor of God and then stand.
Well, actions reveal the inside.
Yeah. You know, God doesn't tell us after you put on the whole armor of God, you don't have to go out there and rush up against the enemy. All God does is tell you to take a stand.
Yeah.
And
well,
hold your position.
Well, there's a lot of symbolism here with spiritual warfare and like our own lives and these strongholds that we face and the obstacles that we face and the story of them trying to conquer the promised land. You know, this whole story in Joshua, them having to go from place to place. You know, they're just fighting battle after battle after battle. And they're winning mostly, but you know, when they are, well, during Joshua's time, I think they won pretty much. Didn't they have an issue where somebody had an idol or something? They had some kind of, maybe that was with Moses. when Moses was around, but that
No.
guy that had the idol and they had a defeat in battle, but
Well, the thing was with Joshua, but when they did
were
not
faithful-
kill everybody.
yeah, when they were faithful in following God, they had success. And you know, they encountered Jericho was just the first stronghold they had to fix, because before this they weren't really doing a lot of. I mean, they were doing a few battles and they were doing some fighting, but they really didn't encounter much out in the wilderness, you know. But now that they're having to move into where God is calling them to go, now they're really encountering opposition and people who are putting up a fight. And, you know, you can see the parallels there. So, I mean, we all have, nobody doesn't have I mean, some people have more strongholds than others, but I mean, everybody has room to things to conquer in life, you know.
Yeah.
Things God wants you to conquer, and calls you to. And there's just a lot of similarity you can see with the story of Joshua and the, you know, your life.
Well, before, I think you were talking about like there's always things to conquer in yourself.
Yeah.
And just occurred to me, it's kind of like doing a lap on a racetrack. You don't try to do a fast lap, you just try to do each part, or at least you try to do each part of that lap, or each corner, each like entry or exit or mid corner, whatever positioning, all that good stuff. Try to do that correctly. I hesitate to say perfectly, but and then the lap time will take care of itself. So if you conquer these things within yourself, then life will take care of itself.
Yeah. And I think that's about all I have for this. I mean, there's probably something else I'll see and I'll be like, darn, I wish I would have mentioned that. Tests of faith and obedience. We talked about why does God work certain ways, certain times. Fortresses and walls. And yeah, it is interesting, again, just going back to the beginning, that God, even though that God was behind these people and helping them, he didn't directly say, I'm on your side.
Right.
That's you know, so that does kind of, God is on our side, but God's not going to support us in everything we want to.
Or was that just a correction? Or could you also interpret that to say that, like, I'm not following you, I'm following God, and he says do this, basically. I'm not on your side, you're on his side, and so am I.
I guess I can see what you're saying there. Yeah,
Did that explanation make sense?
kind of.
Like, I'm not following you. Nope. I'm following God. God is on your side.
Yeah, I think so.
Are you for us or are you for our enemies?
Yeah,
I'm not for you,
yeah,
you know. I'm for God. God
yeah,
happens to be on your side. So here I am.
yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah. I guess just like your parent is, well, I mean, we're grown and all that, but you know, if we have kids, when we have kids.
The kids need to be on your side.
Yeah. No, I mean, we are on this. We do want the best for our kids. But from their perspective, it might not seem like we're always on their side because we might tell them no. Or,
Right.
Yeah,
Maybe
I'm
that's
on your
the-
long-term side, not your short-term side.
right. Yeah. Um,
I'm on your side, but you are not fully on your side. That's the problem.
That's right.
That's the problem we're having.
well said. Well said. Well, I guess unless we have any other things, but is this the record longest session we've ever had?
Certainly not.
Well,
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think 2 hours.
Not
is
even
the-
3 hours. We've had
We're at
longer.
3 hours?
For sure. I said we're not even at 3 hours.
Oh, this might be the longest one.
Maybe. I think we're at like 2 hours, 2.5 hours, maybe.
2.5 hours. Huh.
Like actual broadcast-ish time.
Yeah, that's what we count as the recorded, our recorded time. Official, because we have spent a while setting up and making coffee and lighting candles and moving plants, putting the camera. There's so much that goes into this. People have no idea. But
Yeah, you have to make sure that no one's obstructed by foreground objects, carefully construct the environment.
Yeah. And
I think it's funny that in 25 says Joshua spared Rahab because she had hid the men, and she lives among the Israelites to this day.
Yeah.
She never had to die. And I looked at yours and it says basically the same
I
thing.
thought she married and had a kid with one of the dudes.
Um, and she may have, but I don't think we're ever told that.
Let's answer this really quick. Did you ask Rock, or I can look it up here?
I have.
Rock is the AI that acts. You want to ask Rock? I trust Rock.
Okay, try girl.
Well, I
She
can't. My
married a
phone
man
is
named Salmon.
salmon. Do
And
you
they have a son named Boaz. No, I just put it, I don't know.
Bill, do you have X on your phone?
And then it does say that Boaz would go on later to marry a
Oh,
Moabite woman.
oh, yeah.
A widow. Oh, I had no idea.
Well, Bill,
I
do you
didn't remember
have
that.
Twitter on your phone?
I think so.
So if you go to the app, I'll show you. Have you ever used Grok?
Oh, no, I haven't.
Oh, Grok is free now.
That's
Oh.
interesting. I didn't realize it.
Yeah, Grok is XAI's,
Yeah,
Elon Musk's
yeah.
baby, kind of like.
It's at the bottom.
Not trying to put a negative connotation on that.
I don't have it set out on my new
Relative to Elon
phone.
Musk.
You don't have your Twitter app?
I don't have it set out on my phone yet. This is a new
It's
phone.
not quite as good as OpenAI yet, but
Oh, it's better.
I'm hoping it trends past it. Well, by objective data measurement, I think it's not, but maybe your interactions have been superior. I don't know. The way
By
that
my own objective measurement.
yeah. I don't know. Its ability to do certain things, I guess. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at it in a while, or I haven't seen any comparisons of it in a few months.
Well, I asked it about throwing a snowball off the balcony, and it gave me a good answer.
Oh yeah?
Well, and I've generated some images with it, just kind of playing around.
Oh, I just watched a YouTube video where they did a chess tournament with all the different AIs.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, they had the AIs play each other.
So an AI won?
Rock placed second to Chat GPT.
Wow.
Well, actually, Stockfish, which is the Stockfish, which is the long-standing like chess AI, basically. Which has evolved, like, if you watch a game of chess online or something, it'll have like a bar that's divided white and black, because those are two colors in chess, essentially. Like their percent chance of winning. That percent chance of winning is determined by the Stockfish AI. Don't ask me why it's called Stockfish, but actually Stockfish won. Even with OpenAI, like at like the last 30% of the fight, OpenAI just like started materializing queens out of nowhere. Because I don't know why. Maybe it just really didn't want to lose, but it still lost. Even though Stockfish all the rules, it still defeated OpenAI, with OpenAI very, very heavily cheating towards the end,
Oh,
which is interesting. Yeah.
that doesn't seem right.
Well, we've
No, it
all
wasn't.
come to materialize queens out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Were you able to rock yourself, Bill?
I heard rock.
Big rock.
Never heard of those.
Ask
things.
Rock about Rahab.
Did you hear?
Did
Oh, okay. I thought he asked you.
did Rahab of Jericho have any kids? Question mark. There's our answer.
What's it say?
Grok say.
What would Grok do? No.
Okay.
What? Tell us what.
Rahab is married, like I said, sweetheart, married Salmon and had a son named Boaz, who married Ruth, right? And was an ancestor of King David.
That's pretty cool.
And
Through him, Jesus.
You'll-
Yours?
Very
Wait, who was this guy that is an ancestor of Jesus?
Salmon.
Salmon?
Boaz, who married Ruth. The book of, you could read about her in the book of Ruth.
All
That
power
makes sense.
Jesus' ancestry.
Huh. Well, that's cool.
Then
Pretty cool.
when Ruth was a baby, she
When I was a little bitty baby, my
Oh,
mama
my
did rock
goodness.
me in the cradle. But no.
oh no, she enjoyed eating candy bars with peanuts, right?
Correct.
Hence, we got baby Ruth.
Oh,
That was an awful, terrible.
Rahab
I
married
think that's
Salmon.
digressing.
Rahab married Salomon.
Oh, while we're just talking random stuff, Dad, do you have the old computers still? It'd be fun to dig up.
Nathaniel.
Some of them.
Well, but yeah, but you edit this, right? Or
No,
are we
I'm gonna
past the
keep it
recording part?
Well, let me
Stop recording.
do our thing, and then we'll.
Okay.
So that concludes officially episode 53, and we will be back. I'm using my official voice. We will be back next week. Same
Yes.
time, same place. Well, not the same time. Different time and place and space and time, but it's the same Friday next week at this time, but we'll be posting the video later. So that's probably not relevant if you're watching this, but we will be back continuing with this series. And I believe we might be in the book of Joshua again. But if not, we could be in Judges, Book of Judges. I'm gonna have to just comb through and see where the appearances of God, not just any, again, not just any appearance of God. We're looking at God exhibiting human-like traits or form, or So if we were doing all the appearances of God, that'd be like every verse in the Bible. So just about, but we'll eventually make our way through. So join us next time. And any other concluding remarks? Oh, I was expecting something, but we need our other person here that says, what did he say? Have a good night, folks, or something, or what did Gorov say?
Good night, Mrs. Calabash, wherever